Hey guys, in this video, we're throwing it back to 2014 to check out the Guardians of the Galaxy Knowhere Escape Mission. This set is so nostalgic for me. It came out in June of that year, and it had 3 minifigs, 2 of which are exclusive, and a brick-built Groot. This had 433 pieces and retailed for $39.99, which honestly, by today's standards, feels just about right. So let's revisit this classic set and see what all it had to offer. Our first minifigure is Rocket Raccoon. This is the first and only time he was ever offered in his orange jumpsuit based off of the first movie, and it was a very cool introductory of the gray raccoon tail for the character. Now again, his color scheme is gray. Later it would be changed to brown, which I know some fans like one more than the other, but I can kind of appreciate both. This one did not have any expression under his mouth as we would see with the Volume 2 or Infinity War versions, but he did have these very nice brown shoulder pads that added a lot of cool depth to the character. Our next minifig is Nebula, who I think is aged pretty well, all things considered. Later versions of Nebula would actually invert her color scheme, where the middle of the face would be dark blue and the outer parts of the face would be light blue. Regardless, I really like the torso here, and in Volume 2 we'd get a version that has a little bit more battle damage on it, but overall it's a really nice figure, and the swords were a very good inclusion. Our final minifigure was the Sakharan. We got one of these in every single Guardian set from Volume 1, and it's a decent figure, especially as like a bad guy army builder, but unfortunately these guys were pretty forgettable in the movie. You can lift it up and see that he's got some talons on one side of the head and then a full face on the other that only shows one eye. So the cool thing is if you got all 3 sets, you could kind of army build and mix and match how they looked, and it did have a unique gun, but there's not too much to say because again, they were pretty forgettable in the movie. And while he's technically not a minifigure, this is a good segue to talk about Groot, who was a brick-built figure. For some reason, in the year 2014, LEGO went all out with brick-built figures that summer, giving us this Groot and the Sentinel for the X-Men. Regardless, it is pretty cool. You've got the shoulder joint, you've got a hinge at the elbow, and then you also have a wrist joint. His hand is built out of a brown battle droid body with these fingers that are built identical on both hands. You can kind of see it's pretty simple construction. I always thought that the gray pieces for the hinges really take me out of the build because, of course, Groot is all brown and green, not really gray. This slanted piece is actually a printed piece, which is nice, and this unique torso was only ever used on this figure because it is pretty unique. And I did like the fact that there were jumper plates on the arms so that you could have Rocket displayed up there. And speaking of Rocket on display, he also has this giant brick-built gun. I always thought it was a little oversized, and it kind of makes Rocket a little front-heavy, but it is a very cool gun and definitely reminds me of his giant gun from this scene in the movie. The Sakharan comes with this little turret here that fires a giant red missile, and there's a hinge built in the center where you can move it back and forth. And of course his gun clips up top too, so you have somewhere to store it. And just like all missiles, all you need to do is push down on the red tab at the back, and the missile shoots out just like that. Straight out of the movie, we've got Rocket's little mining pod that he steals on Knowhere. I think that this looks so good. There are a lot of stickers on it, though. Here on the back, you get the drill, but I love having these hands that come out that can kind of like be closed to like grab onto something, just like we see in the film. Then, of course, you can open the cockpit and Rocket is able to be seated inside, but there's also a chair because, of course, in the movie, you know, Quill has one of these at one point, so there are different figures that you could put in there, and we do have a little sticker there for the control panel, but overall this looks really cool. And the other thing I think is interesting is if you open up this flap on the back, you can see that there's all these 1x1 like round pieces in there, and we'll see those again in this set in just a moment. And finally, we have the mining dock here. So I think one cool thing about this is that it's sort of modular in the sense that you could pull this tab out and you could build it long ways if you wanted, or you could remove that centerpiece altogether and you could get creative with these pieces and like move this right here, or you could just take it apart and have it built however you want. So I did think that that's pretty cool and something unique. You could see, I mentioned just a moment ago that we'd run into these little pieces again, and this time there's actually like a little cannon here that you can chuck them out of to shoot. Now, the thing is, the box art tells us that the Sakharan goes up top here, so I guess the goal was to like kind of hit him with these little yellow pieces, so that's pretty unique. Regardless, there's not too much else to say about this. I do like that this part lifts off. In fact, it's a play feature that you can slam on this, and then it makes that whole part topple down. The other cool thing, as you saw there, is that there's this little tab you could pull out here that would make a minifigure fall through, and then they would fall into this pit of the yellow ooze. So that's pretty cool. It does remind me a lot of the sequence from the movie, and overall I think that this is a pretty good set, especially for 40 bucks back in the day. So let's zoom out and I'll give you my final thoughts on this one. Alright guys, well thanks for hanging out with me today. This was super fun to go back and review, and stay tuned for more Guardians reviews leading up to Volume 3. This was so fun to revisit. I'd love to hear what you guys think of this set in the comments down below, and be sure to hit like and subscribe on the way out. Well, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and maybe check out one of my other videos listed here.